welcome. Thanks for showing up for my talk. We're going to jump right in really fast. I run a pretty old company. I was doing digital forensics before it kind of had a name, at least in Canada. And we also run a fully equipped Class 100 clean room. So we do data recovery at the platter level, swapping out motors and head stacks and turning head stacks on and off. I teach for SANS. I teach a few classes for SANS, and I'm also the co-author of Forensics 498, Battlefield Forensics and Data Acquisition. Also, if you want to know more about me, there's a link to my CV. Everything I'm about to talk about in this lecture is true as of right now. It could change in 5 minutes. I think we all know how forensics ends up. And it was funny, Josh had talked about the answer to most forensic questions being, it depends. How very true is that? Now, the reason that I'm up here, well, I blame a few people. I blame Rob Lee, first of all, because I learned a lot of what I thought I knew about digital forensics from him back in the day, or about USB forensics back in the day. Dan Dickerman asked the question to me once about serial numbers on USB devices. This was a few years ago, and that started me down the path that I've come to. And what brought me here today was Chad Tilbury, one of the authors of Forensics 500, when he asked me to review the new courseware on USB forensics. And that turned into a multi-day endeavor. My wife will tell you that when I get a knot in my craw, you're not going to see me for a few days until I come back up the other side. I don't have all the answers. And in fact, you're going to see through today that this raises more questions than it answers. There's a lot of room for research, further research from who? All of you. If anybody here is sitting wondering, you know, I read Twitter and I read blogs, and how do people get their information on there? Where does it come from? It comes from getting a bee in your bonnet and not stopping. Folks, if you ever want to do a little bit of research, reach out to me. I will help you get that started. There are so many different areas within forensics that we need research. Research like this. I am more than happy to help you get started on the road to that research and get you published, because we need this information now more than ever. Now, there's two groups of people in this room right now. There are people who have done or are doing USB forensics for real without the tools. Nintendo forensics, right? Push a button. Does it give me the answer? Hey, it gives me the answer. That must be the right answer. Dun, dun, dun. Wrong. Okay. And the other group of people are people who either have never done USB forensics, maybe you're new to the forensics field, and or have only done USB forensics with push button tools. That is not to say that the tools are bad. Tools are great, tools are efficient, but is your tool telling you the truth? That's why we're here today. Okay, so if you've not done in the weeds USB forensics, some of this may seem a little bit new to you. For those of you that have been doing it for a while, we're just going to do a bit of a review, okay? So the story up to this point, we know that we go into the system hive of the registry. We look inside the USB store subkey, and we see our devices listed. And we've got the make and model of the device. And when we expand that subkey, we are provided with what we have highlighted there. For those of you that have been doing this for a while, what do we call that highlighted number? the serial number. We have been told this is the serial number of our USB device. So just for the example here, that top one is for anyone who's attended most any SANS class, at least before COVID, you know that you got your VMs on a USB device. Well, that's the top one, an example of that USB device. The second one is this one that I have in my hand. I carry it everywhere. It's an Extreme Pro, SanDisk Extreme Pro. And again, this is what we have always believed to be the serial number. Many of us to this day still believe as well that these are the devices, all of the devices that have been connected to our machine via USB. Dun, dun, dun. Wrong. But before we get to finding out how wrong we were, we need to get a little education from Microsoft because they are the all-knowing, all-seeing, everything Windows knowledge keepers, correct? So let's see what Microsoft says about those things that we think are serial numbers. They say that they call them either device IDs or variously serial numbers. And these numbers, now I don't like reading off a slide, but I think it's important to do it here. A device-defined index of the string descriptor that provides a string that contains a manufacturer-determined serial number for the device. The manufacturer-determined serial number of the device. That's pretty darn clear. They are very, very clearly saying those are the serial numbers for the device. We're going to find out that is just not true. Well, let's find out what PowerShell says when we start asking it at a level under the covers. We run the command that you see on the screen here, and it will show us our model. We have those two devices listed. But now look at the serial number. Is that the same as what we just saw? No. Now, I hate to call anybody a liar, but it says on the screen serial number. I didn't edit this. This is the way PowerShell demonstrates it. You're going to see at the very end of the device ID. Now, this is where you see the string that you saw here. Not the same as the serial number. Here, it's calling it a device ID. We're going to come back to that. I said that many of us believe that is where all of the USB connected devices are. And then I said wrong. You see, USB devices are not just USB devices. There's different kinds of USB devices. We have removable storage. We have fixed disk storage. And the factory gets to decide how that device is going to identify when you plug it in. If the device identifies as fixed disk storage, you will never see it in USB store key. So if that's the only place you've been looking for USB devices, you have been missing out. Because if we go back to the system key and we look down where we were looking for the USB store key, well, there's another key there called SCSI. And if we expand that, guess what we see there? That is our list of connected USB devices that identify as fixed disk storage, our external spinning hard drives or solid state in a whole different key. Now, we see something else interesting here because, well, at least the two devices that I have highlighted here, there's a Samsung SSD. There's also a spinning Seagate hard drive. Both of them are highlighted here, and they have what we have long been told is the serial number. But for those of you that have been doing this for a while, you will note that the second character is an ampersand. What have we been told about the ampersand? we have been told that if the second character is an ampersand, that means that the device has not been digitally signed or is not a genuine Windows authorized device, and or it has not been given a serial number by the makers. And so Windows gave it some kind of an identifier just to uniquely identify it as different from another device, right? That ampersand has always been telling us this doesn't have a serial number. So Windows gave it this code, right? For those of us who've been doing that, we know this to be true. I want you to remember this. It's going to come up again. So I took a spinning hard drive, second one listed here from the registry, a Seagate 2.5-inch laptop size spinning hard drive. And you can see on the right, I've got the actual serial number right off the label of the device, right from Seagate, from the factory. So clearly it's got a serial number. Seagate gave it a serial number. Does that serial number look like the serial number on the screen in the registry? And the answer is no. This is going to become problematic. Okay. Now, that serial number on the Seagate drive, that WCC1 and whatever else it is, I want you to keep that in mind. And I've even put it in the top right corner of the next few slides so that you can reference it. I took that hard drive and I plugged it right into the computer. And when I say plugged in, I mean hard line into the motherboard, right through a SATA cable, SATA power, straight into a channel on the motherboard, as though it was a booting hard drive. And then I look to see how it identifies. Well, in Device Manager, it shows up exactly as it is, an ST2000LM007 and the model number. I ran a program called G-Smart Control, which accesses the smart area of a hard drive's firmware beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but it gives us information about the drive. That's the takeaway. And it gives us the serial number, and it gives us the correct serial number. So everything's working just fine when this hard drive is plugged directly into the motherboard. But how often do we take our external drives and plug them directly into the motherboard? We don't, right? That would defeat the purpose of having an external drive. So now let's look at some of the different ways we might connect an external drive to our computers. And one of the ways, the first method that I looked at was with a toaster. So we've got this toaster here. And I take that drive and I put it in the toaster. Now the toaster is connected to the computer as USB. And we can see here, now the model, as far as the device manager is concerned, it's just a little bit different. And you might not even first notice the nuances here. One of the first nuances, there's a space between the M and the 007. And at the end of that model number, it says SCSI disk device. It didn't say that before. Then when we look at it in G-Smart Control, what happened to our serial number? Hold on a second, Kevin. You mean to tell me that you plugged that same hard drive into a toaster and into the machine, and now it's saying the serial number is something different? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because on the top right is a reminder of what the serial number of that hard drive really is. Takeaway number one then. Here in our test session, we're lucky enough to know what the real serial number of that hard drive is. And yet if we were doing forensics on a computer that it was plugged into, that serial number there is what we would have said the serial number is. And we would be wrong. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So while it was plugged into the toaster, I ran a PowerShell command, that same one that I had on the screen earlier. It shows us what it thinks the serial number is. it shows us what the device ID is or what it thinks it is. Ampersand is a second character, clearly must not have a serial number. Windows is trying to help me out. Windows is lying to me. Neither of those is the serial number of my hard drive. But the registry tells me that this serial number is actually that 6 ampersand, which we know not to be true. Well, let's try something different. Because really, how many people throw drives into a toaster? I do it all the time. But maybe a lot of users don't. Maybe they use adapters. So we have this adapter. It's a SATA adapter, SATA to USB. I plug the SATA end into my laptop drive, the one we used for testing, and I plug it in as USB 2. These are or USB 3. These are just pass-through devices. That's all they are. They're a method of accessing the data on the hard drive. Surely they can't be changing things. Well, first of all, don't call me Shirley. And absolutely, they're changing things. Let's have a look at how they're changing things. And there's many different makes and models of these adapters. We plug it in, we run our PowerShell command. Serial number. It's the right serial number. Whoop, whoop. We got a win. And then we look at the device ID. Wait a minute. That 8 ampersand is not the same as what we just had, was it? Previously, it was a 6 ampersand. Okay, because Kevin doesn't know when to quit, Kevin goes and gets a second SATA to USB adapter. Same make, same model, same everything. It's an Apricorn. It's identical to the other one. I just happen to have a drawer full of them. So I take a second one. I plug that same hard drive into a second one. Serial number, entirely different. Device ID, entirely different. Neither of them is our serial number. So what do you think Kevin does next? Kevin goes and does it with a third adapter. And again, another different serial number and another different device ID. If you were looking at this computer in a forensic analysis, you would swear by everything holy that there was 3 separate devices plugged into this machine. And there was not. It was a single device with 3 different adapters. What did you put in your report? 3 hard drives, 6 different metrics. Only one of them is correct. Okay, that's making my head hurt. So let's get away from that, because really, how many people use a SATA to USB adapter? Everybody that's taken Forensics 498, because we give them out. But let's look at this like the more average normal user, because some of you are saying, Kevin, that's great, but let's stop with these fabricated examples that you're trying to use to sensationalize this. And believe me, when I'm sitting where you're sitting and somebody is up here trying to sell me on some fabricated special scenario, like, did you know you can hide data in the firmware area of a hard drive? And everybody goes, oh! And I say, yeah, I know, but yeah, how many people have the $13,000 program that'll allow them to do that? And the knowledge. Let's talk about what's happening today, not what might happen. I'm that guy in the front row that'll ask that dumb question. Anyway, so let's get to devices the average person is using. Samsung T5 external drive, solid state. The only thing that's better than this, in my opinion, is the Samsung T7, but it is normal drive, plugs in USB. It will plug in normal USB. It will plug in USB-C. When you buy them, they've got cables for both. On the case It's got the serial number. S4B4, whatever. When I download and run the Samsung Drive software, it also tells me that's the serial number. Finally, we have things that agree with each other until we plug it into the computer. What we have on the left is G Smart Control version 1.1.3. Look what it says the serial number is. Doesn't look like that S4B thing. Now, fortunately, on the right-hand side, you see I updated G Smart Control to 1.1.4, and it does show me the right serial number. Okay, great. How many people would ever think that this software would give different serial numbers for the same device based on its version? And hey, this is all cool, Kevin. But you know what? The only reason that version 1.1.4 means anything to us in terms of showing the right serial number is only because we know what the right serial number is. Because we plugged that drive in. How many times in your forensic investigations are you the person who plugged the drive in? Never. That's why you're here. Because somebody wants to know what happened. Did you know that your G Smart Control wasn't giving you the right serial number? It's easy to see the right serial number when you're the one that created the artifact. But as an investigator, you're not the one that created the artifact. When we look at that same drive in PowerShell, once again, neither of them are the serial number of the device. Okay, all right. So let's go to our old school. We've got that big Seagate brick of a drive that we bought at Staples. USB 3 on the box, serial number, November Alpha 84F, whatever. That's the serial number. No, it's not. When we look at it in PowerShell, it says that's the serial number. Fair enough. But then it gives us this device ID that has an ampersand as the second character. Do you honestly believe that Seagate did not give this a serial number? Because according to everything we've ever been being told, if the ampersand is the second character, there's no serial number for the device. Well, clearly there is. They're both wrong. Why? If you take that plastic case that the serial number was written on and you tear it apart and you take the hard drive out, this is the hard drive that was inside that plastic enclosure. It is a Seagate hard drive. It's got a serial number, and that's not the serial number that was on the case. So what does that mean for us? What are you putting in your report? What impact does this have legally and forensically? Show of hands in the room. You can do it in Cyberland at home. Put your hand up. I won't be able to see you, but I'll believe that you're actually doing it. How many people in the room here? Law enforcement. Put your hands up if you want to. No law enforcement in the room. Okay, I got a few. Yeah, I got a few. Okay, so if you're not law enforcement, how many in the room doing investigations in the criminal or civil realm? Yeah, a lot more hands. How does this impact your investigation now? Because you have written reports in the past. You don't have to put up your hands for this one, but I know it's happened. I won't get you to embarrass yourself. You have written reports that said this user plugged in this device at this date and time, and here's the make, model, and serial number, and they have not turned that device over pursuant to our production order. Maybe you even went further and in a court of law challenged that they were withholding evidence. And they're saying, I didn't. I gave you everything. No, you didn't. Because we can see the serial number right here. If this is not scaring a few people or making a few people just a little bit uncomfortable, maybe you're in the wrong profession. We looked at this drive in G-Smart Control and it did get the serial number right. So we're happy with that. But then we looked at the Windows event log and it had the serial number of the plastic enclosure, not the drive itself. So then what are you investigating? Are you investigating a hard drive or are you investigating the plastic enclosure? I can tell you that I swap out the hard drives in my plastic enclosures frequently on an as-needed basis. Now, the one good thing that I found in all of my testing that was consistent the whole time was no matter what Windows said was the serial number, whatever that thing was consistent throughout all of the artifacts in all of the different places in the registry. So if it said it was that 8 ampersand 1, 2, 3, 4, it said that throughout all of the other artifacts relative to that device. The problem is, where are you going to find that device? Because that thing with the ampersand is going to change each time you plug the device into a different USB port on the computer. In fact, depending on the computer and the version of Windows, it may change plugging it into the same USB port again. And we haven't given it a second thought because we've always been told that's the serial number. Now, you might say, well, okay, Kevin, but it's consistent. So yeah, maybe we shouldn't be calling it a serial number, but really what's the big deal? I don't think I need to explain to anybody here how big a deal terminology is. Terminology is critical. If you call something a serial number, it better be that unique identifier issued by the manufacturer and not some different artifact that Windows or some other tool told you is the serial number. So what do we call it? I don't even know what to call it. Maybe we should call it a Windows assigned device identification. Maybe that would be a better term for it. Because in that way, we are now saying, hey, Windows issued this identifier at the time the device was plugged in. It behooves you as examiners to put into your report even just a small paragraph about this, especially if you don't have the actual device anymore that had been plugged in to do testing with. Otherwise, what are you saying about your investigation? And what effect might that have on the person you're doing the investigation against or on or for? Anybody who's taken a SANS class has had it drilled into their head. I don't care which curriculum. I don't care if it's 498, 500, 572, 585. Pick your class, pick your number, pick your alphabet soup. I know every single instructor has told you more than once, don't blindly trust your tools. Trust, but verify. We have to do this. It's great to use a tool to make what we're doing more efficient. But what's more important than even that, understand how your tool is getting the information that it's getting. I often get asked, Kevin, what about USB detective? What is it showing when you do this? I don't know. I did not use USB detective in my run of testing. I was so far down the rabbit hole and making myself more and more and more confused as I went, it didn't even cross my mind to use USB detective to see what it was saying. I will cautiously suggest that based on my use of USB detective, I would suggest that it's going to show that Windows device ID. I don't think it's going to get the serial number right either. And I say that because I have a relatively good idea where USB detective is getting its artifacts from. And those places are going to have that Windows device ID, not the actual serial number. This is scary. You know, it's great when you write a report and nobody asks any questions. Now you sound like the genius. Good thing we brought the expert in, paid him all this money. We got exactly what it was we needed. But it becomes quite uncomfortable if you're on the stand or you're sitting in a room during depositions or interrogatories or even just being questioned by your manager while somebody else is on the other side listening, and they say to you, "Are you sure that's a serial number? Or could it just be a device ID? Did you examine the hard drive or did you examine the enclosure?" If you're anything like me, you wonder where that question came from. Because a lawyer is not asking you a random question just for giggles. And that's when the sweat starts, right about here. Because you know they know something that maybe you missed. And things are going to start getting very uncomfortable. Folks, what you do matters. I can't stress this enough. I don't care what area you are doing digital forensics in. I don't care if you're law enforcement. I don't care if you're government. I don't care if you're a contractor, if you're a consultant. I don't care if you're doing digital forensics on an internal team for your company as part of incident response. Digital forensics, especially above any other computer-related industry or profession, has the ability to change lives. Your report has the ability to, in part, remove someone's freedoms, put them in jail, get them fired. You hold an immense amount of power. And if you don't approach every single investigation with that amount of power in mind, Starbucks is always hiring baristas. What you do matters, and you need to investigate like it does. It was easy to see the problems we had because we knew what the device was that we had plugged in. When you're doing an investigation, people are asking you what was plugged in. What are you telling them? If you want to see a little bit more of that in detail, and who knows, maybe a whole bunch of other forensic stuff just for giggles, I really didn't have a whole lot to do during COVID. So I happened to bang out, how many? 200 videos, okay? 3 minutes max, 3-minute videos on just a ton of things forensic, techniques, procedures, knowledge, on digital forensics and information security. And the reason I picked 3 minutes was because everybody's doing 1 hour things. And how many people have sat through a 1 hour webinar going, that wasn't what I thought it was. Can't get that hour back. Everybody's got 3 minutes. Come on. There's things everybody does at least once every day that takes you at least 3 minutes. And you could be doing this too. And if there's nothing in there that was of interest, it was only 3 minutes. Folks, I know that everybody who gets up here and talks says the same thing. I'm going to say it because I truly mean it. If you have any questions, if you want to do research but don't know where to start or where to get your research put, reach out to me. I will help you. We need researchers. Take what I've done in this talk and go further. Do testing. Maybe your research project is everything I did, but with the tools that we're all using. What does NCASE say about this? What does FTK say about this? What does USB Detective say about this? That could be its own research project. You do the research. I'll help you put it into a paper. I'll help you get it posted because we all need to know. Last thing I have to say, Grayson says, go Flames.